Delighted to have with us Tim Mak, who is coming to us from the Munich Security Council. Tim, of course, is a ace international reporter, and we are able to feature his reporting from Ukraine and other places around the globe. Welcome, Tim. So this was a
Thanks so much for having me.
very momentous, I think, in many ways, Munich Security Council. Talk to us a little bit about the remarks that the new Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, made and the reaction that it caused.
I'm here in Munich, where European leaders are gathering with what they once thought were very reliable allies, but whom now Pete Hegseth has kind of called out as folks who ought to be doing business over there, and we ought to be doing business over here in the United States. So Hegseth has started the negotiations that are likely to take place between the United States and Russia by giving away something for nothing already, by saying, okay, Ukraine is not likely to be in NATO. And by the way, Russia, we believe that Ukraine is not going to return all of its sovereign territory or control over all of its sovereign territory. And what did it get in return for these two major concessions, by the way, that Ukrainians have fought and died for to prevent? Nothing, nothing at all. Uh, beginning a negotiation by giving away two major things that Ukrainians have fought for makes absolutely no sense. And here in Munich, among European security officials in Kyiv, people are tearing out their hair, saying, "Is this what, is this the end of American leadership?" So what Europe is trying to figure out is whether we're entering this new phase in which all of these politics become transactional, where the United States won't do things unless they're paid to do it, where there won't be security alliances unless the United States gets paid for it, and whether or not we're entering a very dangerous phase in which authoritarians get the message: if you invade another country, in the long run, people will get bored and you will be rewarded for it.
Was there any effort that you could see to walk back or modify Hegseth's statements? I think there's some question about whether all of these people who are grossly unqualified, unfit for international diplomatic work, really speak for the president, or frankly, if the president has a consistent view on these things.
Well, the president doesn't have a consistent view on these things, but President Trump thrives on chaos and disorder. Um, it reminds of basically the Trump administration over the last few weeks has flooded the zone with so much sewage, so many controversial decisions that it's hard for you or I, and we do this for a living, to keep up, let alone most American people, even those who really try to pay attention to the details. Yes, Hegseth has tried to walk back some of these comments, but it's really unclear whether he ever had authority to make the comments in the first place or authority to walk back the comments in the second place. There's a very interesting interview between JD Vance and the Wall Street Journal, in which JD Vance actually suggests that maybe troops on the ground are on the table. American troops on the ground are on the table. I don't know on whose authority these pronouncements are being made. There's no
Right.
coordination. It's just absolute chaos, and people are just throwing ideas at the wall, trying to figure out what Donald Trump is eventually going to approve, and no one knows.
Speaking of JD Vance, he also made some comments that were quite extraordinary about the upcoming German elections. What did he say, and what was the reaction to that?
He's essentially trying to lecture the Germans to be more accepting of their own far right, saying that these populist movements ought to be accepted by mainstream German society. Um, Countries don't typically take very well to being lectured about how to do their own internal politics. I don't think those comments would be if we flipped it around and we had European political officials coming to the United States lecturing the Trump administration about how AOC isn't, given enough of a voice in the current American government and system. I don't think that would be well taken, and that this is not well taken here in Europe either. It's not the foundation of a collaborative, meaningful partnership in which Europeans feel like they're working with allies. In fact, if you look over the last few weeks, the Trump administration has started out by doing everything they can to try to alienate longtime friends. They view friendship as leverage. They view
I,
this shared history as leverage and something to transact rather than something that unites us due to shared values and in many cases bloodshed with one another as a result of establishing a long-held world order that has led to peace and stability and prosperity. They're tossing it all out because they think that it's a transactional relationship.
and they may not be wrong in that. As we wrap up, let me ask you about European solidarity. Obviously, with the United States, very much a question mark. There has been some talk among European leaders that they'll nevertheless hold the line on Ukraine. What is the sense among European leaders, first of all, about the ability to hang together if the US isn't a partner? And secondly, whether that we are seeing a real split between the United States and the European community in which their foreign policy may diverge in some real respects from ours.
I think it's already diverging. I think that's obvious. I think that Europe at large is looking for a collaborative approach and an American foreign policy that involves leadership on the basis of shared values and a mission, which is to support democracies around the world. As for your question about whether the European Union is likely to, I think that there's a lot of symbolic support and then a lack of capacity to follow through. So, so the EU is waking up to the fact that they have been a huge benefactor or a huge beneficiary of the post-Cold War peace dividend, right? Over times of peace, they dramatically reduced their spending on defense and innovation and the defense tech space, and they're realizing how far they've fallen behind. The Europeans want to support Ukraine. They don't have the means to do so absent American partnership and collaboration. That's the real trouble here. And so while if you talk to most European officials, they'll say they certainly support Ukraine. They're limited in their ability to back up that talk with action. Their budgets are not large enough. Their defense technology is not sufficiently advanced enough, and it's going to take some years for Europe to catch up and be responsible for its own being able to throw its weight around in a sufficient way when it comes to defense. And in that time, I think Ukraine is going to suffer quite a great deal.
Well, I think what you have said, Tim, is the reality that America remains the indispensable country. And when we don't act, bad things will happen. The vacuum will be filled by bad actors, in this case, by Russia. And that the post-World War II architecture that you described has benefited the United States as well in terms of prosperity, in terms of security and avoidance of war. So we are really entering uncharted territory, and we are delighted that you are there to observe it, as disturbing as it may be. So thank you for all your work. Thank you for your contributions to the Contrarian, and we will hear from you soon, I'm sure.
Thanks so much. And if folks are trying to track what's happening in Ukraine, we'd love for them to check us out at the Counteroffensive, which can be read at www.counteroffensive.news.